Discover the captivating life of Virginia Joan Bennett Kennedy, a woman whose elegance and resilience defined an era of triumphs and tragedies. Born in the vibrant heart of New York City, Joan's journey began with promise, shaped by a devout Catholic upbringing and a childhood in picturesque Bronxville. From her early days as a radiant television model to her pivotal role in one of America's most iconic political dynasties, her story is a roller coaster of glamour, heartbreak, and redemption. What secrets did she carry through the dazzling yet turbulent Kennedy world? How did she navigate personal struggles under the unrelenting spotlight of fame? This video unveils the untold chapters of Joan's life, her rise, her challenges, and her enduring strength. Perfect for history buffs and biography lovers, this deep dive will leave you inspired and curious for more. Like, comment, and subscribe to join our community exploring extraordinary lives. Share your thoughts. What part of Joan's story intrigues you most? Hit the notification bell for more compelling tales, and check out our channel for similar stories of remarkable figures. Don't miss out. Watch now and uncover the legacy of Joan Kennedy. Virginia Joan Bennett, who later became known as Joan Kennedy, was born on September 2, 1936, at Mother Cabrini Hospital in the Riverdale section of New York City, a neighborhood that blended the city's vibrant energy with a touch of residential calm. This hospital held a special place in history. Founded in 1898 by St. Francis Xavier Cabrini, the first American saint, who was an Italian-American nun devoted to helping immigrants and the poor arrive and thrive in their new homeland. St. Cabrini established numerous institutions across the country, and this hospital was one of them, providing essential care to underserved communities, including Italian immigrants, at a time when healthcare options were scarce for many. Her canonization in 1946 would have been a notable event in Catholic circles, possibly even discussed or celebrated within Joan's family, given their strong faith. The choice of this hospital by her parents likely reflected their own values of compassion, community service, and deep-rooted Catholicism, themes that subtly influenced Joan's upbringing from the very start. New York City in 1936 was a bustling metropolis, still recovering from the Great Depression, with President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal programs, sparking signs of economic revival through public works and social reforms. Iconic structures like the Empire State Building, completed just 5 years prior, stood as symbols of ambition and resilience, while cultural elements such as jazz music, thriving in Harlem clubs, and ongoing waves of immigrants added to the city's dynamic atmosphere. Global events, including the 1936 Berlin Olympics, where American athlete Jesse Owens made headlines for his triumphs amid rising tensions in Europe, filtered into daily news via newspapers and radio broadcasts, potentially reaching the Bennett household and shaping their awareness of the wider world. Being born in such an environment right in the heart of the city with its honking taxis, towering buildings, and diverse street life probably instilled in Joan an early sense of toughness and adaptability characteristic of New Yorkers. Even though her family soon relocated to a more tranquil suburban setting for her childhood. The family settled in Bronxville, New York, a charming suburb just a short train ride from Manhattan on the Harlem Division of the New York Central Railroad, allowing easy access to the city while offering a peaceful escape. Bronxville, incorporated in 1898 and developed by real estate mogul William Van Duzer Lawrence, was known for its picturesque Tudor-style homes, excellent public schools, and manicured lawns that evoked a sense of classic American suburbia. It was a community where families could enjoy safety and stability, contrasting sharply with the urban hustle of New York City. Joan grew up in a devout Roman Catholic family that embodied the hardworking, close-knit ideals of the era's American dream. Faith was central to their daily life. As Roman Catholics in a predominantly Protestant area, they may have stood out slightly, but it only strengthened their unity. They likely attended regular Sunday Masses at St. Joseph's Church, a local parish featuring Gothic architecture, intricate stained glass windows illustrating biblical stories, and solemn rituals like confession and communion that provided moral anchors. Religious holidays were observed with great tradition. Christmas involved midnight mass, family prayers, and festive gatherings, while Easter included processions, egg hunts, and reflective services, all reinforcing values of kindness, perseverance, moral integrity, and family bonds. This stable home served as a sanctuary during turbulent times. In the late 1930s, as the world geared up for World War II with events like the 1938 Munich Agreement and the 1939 German invasion of Poland making headlines, the suburb shielded young Joan from direct chaos. Wartime realities in the 1940s brought rationing of essentials like sugar, gasoline, and meat, teaching lessons in frugality and resourcefulness that families managed through victory gardens and community efforts. Post-war prosperity in the late 1940s and early 1950s brought economic growth with new consumer goods and suburban expansion, allowing Joan to focus on everyday joys and dream big in a secure environment. The Catholic upbringing instilled deep qualities of empathy, ethical strength, and resilience that would later shine in her public life, helping her navigate personal and familial challenges. Leading the family was her father, Harry Wiggin Bennett Jr., born in 1907. Some records suggest in London, though his family had strong American ties, and who passed away in 1981 at the age of 74 in Covington, Louisiana. Harry was a distinguished figure, having graduated from Cornell University in the late 1920s, an impressive accomplishment as Cornell was an Ivy League powerhouse renowned for its innovative programs in engineering, agriculture, business, hotel management, and veterinary science. Set in the scenic town of Ithaca with its dramatic gorges and rigorous academic environment, the university produced leaders equipped for success. Harry applied his education to a thriving career as an advertising executive on Madison Avenue, the epicenter of the industry in the 1930s and 1940s, evoking the high-stakes world later depicted in shows like Mad Men. He crafted campaigns for major brands, possibly including household names like General Electric or Ford, using emerging media such as radio and television to sell products ranging from soaps and cars to appliances that promise convenience and a better life. The post-Depression boom in advertising saw innovations like persuasive slogans, billboard designs, and client pitches, and Harry navigated this cutthroat landscape with creative pitches and dinners that built networks. During the World War II, he might have contributed to propaganda efforts that boosted national morale and supported the war economy through motivational ads. At home, he shared stories of these experiences, high-stakes meetings, clever campaigns that went viral in their era via radio spots or print media, exposing young Joan to the glitz of advertising, perhaps through flipping glossy magazines or listening to captivating radio broadcasts. His Cornell alumni connections likely involved events where influential people gathered, broadening Joan's early exposure to professional networks. This influence sparked her interest in the spotlight, teaching skills in persuasion, presentation, communication, and charisma that proved essential later. Harry's career adapted to the post-war economic surge, embracing television's rise and emphasizing visual storytelling in consumer culture, modeling adaptability for his daughters. Her mother, Virginia Joan Stead, Born in 1911 and passing in 1976 at age 65 in Cocoa Beach, Florida, where she was buried at Long Island National Cemetery, served as the steady anchor of the home. Sharing her full name with Joan, Virginia Joan, indicated a deep emotional bond and a tradition of passing down identity, strength, and grace. Growing up in the aftermath of the Roaring Twenties, Virginia might have shared personal stories of that era's flapper fashion, cultural shifts, the 1929 stock market crash that plunged the nation into depression, or the impacts of women's suffrage granted in 1920, which began reshaping gender roles. As a homemaker in Bronxville, she managed the household's daily rhythm with quiet resilience, preparing family meals that adapted Depression-era thriftiness to post-war abundance, ensuring the girls were neatly dressed for church and school, and cultivating an environment prioritizing education, manners, and nurturing. In the post-Depression years, women like her balanced traditional roles, sewing clothes, tending gardens during rationing for fresh produce, with evolving societal changes. The Rosie the Riveter campaign during World War II encouraged female workforce participation, though Virginia focused on supporting Harry's career and raising their daughters amid challenges like air raid drills and community support systems. She embodied determination, handling wartime hardships and peacetime celebrations with poise, serving as a role model for Joan in balancing grace with practicality. Some accounts note that both parents faced struggles with alcoholism, adding layers of complexity to family dynamics and possibly fostering Joan's early development of empathy and inner strength as she navigated these realities. Joan was not an only child. She had a younger sister, Candace Bennett, born in 1938 and affectionately nicknamed Candy, who later married attorney Robert McMurray in the late 1950s and lived in Houston, Texas until his death in 2015 from Alzheimer's complications. The 2-year age difference made them close companions, growing up side by side in Bronxville and sharing nearly everything from toys to confidences. As the older sister, Joan took on protective and guiding roles, fostering a sense of responsibility that built character. Their childhood was filled with typical activities: riding bikes down quiet, tree-lined roads, playing hopscotch on sidewalks, building forts in the backyard, or engaging in pretend tea parties that sparked imagination. They likely attended the same local schools, including Bronxville High School, where Joan graduated in the class of 1954, serving as assistant editor of the school newspaper and demonstrating early talents in writing and organization. Participation in clubs like Brownies or Girl Scouts involved crafts, camping, and service projects that taught cooperation, competition, sharing, empathy, and lifelong bonds. Everyday moments strengthened their connection. Holiday baking, like decorating Christmas cookies or preparing Easter treats, performing in school plays that honed public presence, or attending summer camps for adventures in nature. Sibling dynamics included sharing clothes as teenagers, whispering secrets at night in a shared room. Joan perhaps dreaming of glamour, Candy of explorations, and navigating the ups and downs of girlhood together. Family outings to Bronxville's parks for picnics or community events like village fairs fostered social skills and kept them grounded under parental supervision. Even as adults, with life pulling them in different directions, this sisterly bond remained a source of emotional support and joy, with Candy's nickname adding warmth and humanizing their family story through life's turns. Education formed a cornerstone of Joan's foundation, beginning with her time at Manhattanville College in Purchase, New York, a serene suburb not far from Bronxville that felt like a natural extension of home. Founded in 1841 as an academy in Manhattan, it relocated to Purchase in 1952. During Joan's attendance, modernizing its campus while retaining its identity as a Sacred Heart college run by the Religious of the Sacred Heart Order. This Catholic institution emphasized a well-rounded liberal arts education infused with faith principles, focusing on women's empowerment, intellectual, and spiritual growth through a curriculum that included philosophy, languages, literature, history, theology, arts, and social justice themes. Joan majored in English and music, graduating in 1958, and was an accomplished pianist, honing her mind and talents in classes that encouraged critical thinking and global awareness. Daily chapel services built community, while social events taught etiquette and networking for high society interactions. What made this choice particularly fascinating was the unwitting connections it created to her future in-laws. Manhattanville was the alma mater of Rose Kennedy, her future mother-in-law, who attended in the 1910s and absorbed values of discipline, intellect, and unshakable faith that she passed to her children, shaping her as the Kennedy family's pillar. Future sisters-in-law Jean Kennedy Smith, who became U.S. Ambassador to Ireland and a humanitarian advocate for peace, and Ethel Skakel Kennedy, the dedicated supporter of Robert F. Kennedy's causes, also studied there in the 1940s and 1950s, benefiting from the school's rigor in service and leadership. This shared history felt like destiny, aligning Joan's path with the Kennedys long before she met Ted. Common traditions, such as alumni gatherings or chapel rituals, later bridged family ties. In fact, Jean introduced Joan to Ted in October 1957 at the dedication of a gymnasium at Manhattanville in memory of Kathleen Kennedy, who died in a 1948 plane crash. For Joan, this education went beyond books. It formed a worldview grounded in faith, service, ethics, and responsibility that perfectly aligned with the Kennedy ethos, preparing her for public life. Before the Kennedy name and these degrees, Joan explored modeling as a teenager in the 1950s, a time when television was exploding into American homes, revolutionizing entertainment and advertising. Families gathered around black and white sets for shows like I Love Lucy, which influenced ad styles with humor and relatability. Joan worked as a television advertising model, appearing in commercials promoting everyday items like cosmetics, appliances, or beverages. Specifically, she was known as the Revlon Girl on The Perry Como Show and featured on Coke Time with Eddie Fisher. With joining the Actors Union under her name, her fresh-faced charm, bright eyes, and confident demeanor lit up screens, blending classic American girl-next-door appeal with sophistication. This wasn't a fleeting hobby. It required more than looks, precise timing, expressive faces to convey emotion in the black and white era, comfort under bright lights, and handling pressure during auditions, where rejection was common and built resilience. Outdoor activities in Bronxville, such as tennis or swimming, kept her physically active and enhanced her poise, while her Catholic upbringing instilled humility to balance any emerging ego from the work. Her mother's influence likely ensured politeness and grace in auditions, key to success. These experiences taught self-assurance and camera skills that later served her well in the glare of political campaigns and public events. Joan Bennett Kennedy's marriage to Edward Moore Kennedy, widely known as Ted, marked a dramatic transformation in her life, catapulting her from a relatively private existence into the whirlwind of one of America's most powerful, glamorous, and tragedy-prone political families. It was in October 1957 that Joan's path intersected with Ted's, in a moment steeped in both family legacy and quiet serendipity. The occasion was the dedication ceremony for a new gymnasium at Manhattanville College, a building funded by the Kennedy family as a heartfelt memorial to Ted's older sister, Kathleen Kick Kennedy. Kathleen had met a tragic end nearly a decade earlier, on May 13, 1948, when the plane she was aboard crashed in the French countryside during stormy weather, killing her along with her fiancé, Peter Fitzwilliam, the 8th Earl Fitzwilliam, and 2 others. The event carried a heavy emotional weight as the Kennedys gathered to honor her memory in a place tied to their Catholic roots and educational traditions. Jean Kennedy Smith, Ted's sister, and a Manhattanville alumna herself, played the role of matchmaker, introducing Joan to her younger brother, Edward. At 25 years old, Ted was the baby of the 9 Kennedy siblings, studying at the University of Virginia School of Law in Charlottesville, where he balanced his academic pursuits with the family's expectations of greatness. He radiated the quintessential Kennedy charisma, ambitious, outgoing, and irresistibly engaging. Yet he was also seen within the tight-knit clan as the more free-spirited and occasionally rebellious one, contrasting with the disciplined paths of his older brothers, Joseph, John, and Robert. The connection between Joan and Ted was immediate and electric, sparking a courtship that unfolded with the rapid intensity characteristic of the Kennedy world, blending romance with the undercurrents of dynastic pressure. As their relationship deepened, Joan and Ted moved toward engagement with remarkable speed, but this whirlwind pace brought Joan a growing sense of unease. In later reflections shared through interviews and personal accounts, she admitted to feeling increasingly overwhelmed, grappling with doubts about whether she truly knew Ted deeply enough to commit to a lifetime together. Beyond the personal uncertainties, Joan sensed the enormity of what she was stepping into, not just a marriage to one man, but an immersion into the formidable Kennedy dynasty, a family whose lives were defined by relentless ambition, public service, and an almost mythical aura of American royalty. The Kennedys were a formidable entity, led by the iron-willed patriarch Joe Kennedy Sr., a self-made millionaire through shrewd investments in business, Hollywood, and politics, who demanded excellence and pushed his children toward roles of national prominence with unyielding determination. Joe's influence loomed large, and despite Joan's hesitations about rushing into the union, he firmly insisted that the wedding proceed without delay, viewing it as another step in solidifying the family's future. On November 29, 1958, Joan and Ted exchanged vows in a modestly scaled family ceremony at St. Joseph's Church in Bronxville, New York, a setting that reflected Joan's roots rather than the ostentatious flair often associated with Kennedy events. The reception followed at the nearby Siwanoy Country Club, keeping the affair intimate and understated, attended primarily by close relatives and friends. The timing added a layer of political excitement, as the wedding came just weeks after Ted's brother, Senator John F. Kennedy, achieved a landslide victory in his re-election to the U.S. Senate seat from Massachusetts, securing over 73% of the vote and further elevating the family's status as a political powerhouse on the rise. This confluence of personal joy and public triumph underscored the inseparable blend of private life and national ambition that would define Joan's new reality. With Ted still immersed in his legal studies at the University of Virginia, the couple made the practical decision to postpone their honeymoon until after his graduation in June 1959, a delay that symbolized the sacrifices often required in their high-stakes world. When the time finally came, they escaped for a romantic retreat, reportedly to the sun-drenched beaches of Acapulco, Mexico, where they could savor uninterrupted time together, basking in the tropical warmth and enjoying a rare bubble of privacy away from the ever-present glare of public attention. Upon returning, Ted passed the bar exam with success, clearing the path for his entry into the political arena, while Joan embraced her evolving role as a supportive spouse in a family where public service was not just a career, but a calling passed down through generations. She navigated the transition with quiet determination, adapting to the demands of being a Kennedy wife, attending events, managing household affairs, and standing by Ted as he began to carve out his own identity in the shadow of his accomplished brothers. In the years that followed their wedding, Joan and Ted built a family against the backdrop of Ted's rapidly ascending political career and the unyielding scrutiny that came with bearing the Kennedy name. Their home life blended moments of domestic warmth with the pressures of public expectation as they welcomed 3 children into the world. The first, Cara Ann Kennedy, arrived on February 27, 1960, in Bronxville, New York, her birth coinciding with the height of John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign, infusing the family with a sense of excitement and added strain as the nation watched the Kennedys' every move. Just over a year later, on September 26, 1961, Edward Moore Kennedy Jr., affectionately called Ted Jr., was born in Boston, marking another joyful expansion as Ted Sr. began contemplating his own foray into elected office. Their youngest, Patrick Joseph Kennedy, completed the family on July 14, 1967, also in Boston, during a time when Ted was firmly established in the Senate, his days filled with legislative battles and national issues. Yet amidst these celebrations, their family life was touched by profound sorrow. Joan endured the devastating loss of a stillborn baby boy sometime between the births of Ted Jr. and Patrick, a deeply private tragedy that she rarely spoke about publicly, amplifying the emotional complexities of raising children under the relentless gaze of the media and society. This unspoken grief highlighted the vulnerabilities hidden beneath the polished exterior of Kennedy family life, where personal pains were often borne in silence to maintain the image of strength and resilience. Raising children in the Kennedy fold meant that every aspect of their lives was amplified to an extraordinary degree. Birthdays and milestones became national news. Achievements were celebrated on a grand scale, and any setbacks were dissected by journalists and the public alike. Joan often shouldered the primary responsibilities of day-to-day parenting, managing the household and nurturing the children, while Ted devoted long hours to his senatorial duties in Washington and campaigns across Massachusetts. The family divided their time between residences that reflected their dual lives: a cozy townhouse on Charles River Square in Boston for state connections, a summer home on Squaw Island off Cape Cod for relaxed family gatherings, and later a townhouse in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., to accommodate Ted's congressional work. Despite the privileges of wealth and status, the constant travel, security concerns, and invasive attention created a unique set of challenges, fostering a sense of isolation for Joan as she balanced motherhood with the expectations of being a political spouse. The children grew up surrounded by the aura of their uncles' presidencies and assassinations, John in 1963 and Robert in 1968, events that cast long shadows of grief and heightened awareness of mortality over the household, deepening the family's bonds while also intensifying Joan's role as an emotional anchor. The family confronted remarkable health ordeals that tested their resilience to its limits, creating an atmosphere where it sometimes felt as though a persistent cloud of illness and misfortune hovered over the Kennedys. During this era, the most immediate and severe adversity struck Ted himself, placing enormous strain on Joan and the young children. On June 19, 1964, while campaigning vigorously for his first full Senate term after an initial special election victory, Ted was a passenger in a small Aero Commander 680 twin-engine plane en route from Washington, D.C. to the Massachusetts Democratic Convention in West Springfield. As the aircraft approached Barnes Municipal Airport in Westfield amid foggy conditions, it suddenly plummeted into an apple orchard near Southampton, Massachusetts, in a catastrophic crash that killed the pilot, Edwin T. Zimney, and Ted's close aide, Edward Moss. Ted survived the impact but sustained devastating injuries: 3 fractured vertebrae in his back, a punctured lung, multiple broken ribs, and severe internal bleeding that left him fighting for his life. Rescued from the wreckage by fellow Senator Birch Bay, who was also aboard and escaped with minor injuries, Ted was rushed to Cooley Dickinson Hospital in Northampton, where he endured 6 grueling months of hospitalization. His treatment involved being immobilized in traction, undergoing intensive physical therapy, and eventually being fitted with a back brace that he would wear for the rest of his life, causing chronic pain that affected his mobility and daily comfort. The crash not only threatened Ted's physical recovery, but also cast uncertainty over his political future, as he lay bedridden, reflecting on his life and the family's history of losses. In this moment of crisis, Joan demonstrated extraordinary strength and dedication, stepping fully into the public arena to support her husband's re-election bid. With Ted incapacitated, she assumed his entire campaign schedule, traveling tirelessly across Massachusetts to deliver speeches, meet voters, and rally support. Her poise and warmth captivated audiences, as she emphasized the Kennedy family's values of service, resilience, and unity, drawing on her own experiences to connect personally with constituents. Her efforts were pivotal in securing Ted's landslide victory that November, where he garnered over 70% of the vote, a testament to her effectiveness and the public's sympathy for the family's plight. This period came on the heels of Ted's entry into the Senate, which began with a special election in November 1962 to fill the remaining 2 years of his brother John's term. John had resigned after winning the presidency in November 1960, and Massachusetts Governor Foster Fercolo appointed Benjamin A. Smith II as a temporary placeholder until Ted reached the constitutionally required age of 30. Ted then defeated Edward McCormick Jr. in the Democratic primary and George Cabot Lodge in the general election, launching what would become one of the longest Senate careers in history. The 1964 crash and Joan's campaigning role underscored the intertwined nature of their personal and political lives, demanding immense fortitude from Joan as she juggled motherhood. Kara was 4, Ted Jr. 3, and Patrick not yet born, with the rigors of a high-profile election. These health crises were deeply interwoven into the core of Joan and Ted's marriage, requiring Joan to summon tremendous inner resources as she balanced the demands of raising young children, fulfilling public obligations, and providing unwavering emotional and practical support to her husband. She became the steadfast foundation of the family, maintaining stability and normalcy for the children amid the chaos of hospital visits, media intrusions, and the ever-present weight of the Kennedy legacy. Her ability to hold everything together under such relentless public observation spoke to her quiet resolve, even as the cumulative stresses took a toll on her own well-being. Yet no amount of preparation could have fortified them against the devastating event that unfolded in July 1969. The Chappaquiddick incident, a scandal that shattered their world, irreparably damaged Ted's reputation and imposed an unbearable strain on Joan at a moment of personal vulnerability. The incident began on a warm summer evening on Chappaquiddick Island. a small secluded landmass off Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, where Ted had organized a casual cookout at the rented Lawrence cottage. The gathering was intended as a reunion for the Boiler Room Girls, a group of 6 dedicated young women who had worked tirelessly in the back offices of his brother Robert F. Kennedy's ill-fated 1968 presidential campaign, handling crucial administrative tasks with loyalty and efficiency. The party, which started around 8:30 p.m. on July 18th, included attendees such as Rosemary Keogh, Esther Newberg, Nance Lyons, Mary Ellen Lyons, Susan Tannenbaum, and the ill-fated Mary Jo Kopechne, a 28-year-old former teacher from Pennsylvania turned bright and committed political aide. Also present were several married men, including Ted's cousin Joe Gargan, former U.S. Attorney Paul Markham, chauffeur John Crimmins, and others like Charles Tretter and Raymond LaRosa. Notably, spouses were not invited, creating an informal atmosphere charged with reminiscences of Bobby's campaign, shared laughter, and perhaps a sense of camaraderie born from past political battles. The setting was relaxed, with grilled food, drinks, and conversations flowing late into the night, but it would soon turn into the backdrop for one of the most infamous scandals in American political history. Around 11:15 p.m., Ted offered to drive Mary Jo Kopechne back to the ferry crossing so she could return to her lodging at the Katama Shores Inn in Edgartown on the mainland. Kopechne, who had inadvertently left her purse and hotel key behind at the cottage, a detail later noted as suggesting she might not have intended to leave permanently, joined Ted in his black 1967 Oldsmobile Delmont 88. According to Ted's account, he made a fateful wrong turn onto the unpaved Dyke Road instead of continuing on the main paved Chappaquiddick Road toward the ferry landing. This error led them toward the narrow Dyke Bridge, a 10.5-foot wide wooden structure set at an oblique angle to the road and lacking any guardrails, a precarious crossing over the tidal waters. Part-time Deputy Sheriff Christopher Huck later reported spotting a similar vehicle in the area around 12:40 a.m., a sighting that would raise questions about the precise timeline of events and fuel endless speculation. Shortly thereafter, disaster struck as the car veered off the bridge, plunging into the dark, swirling waters of Poocha Pond. The vehicle flipped upside down and sank rapidly in about 6 to 8 feet of water, trapping Kopechne in the back seat amid the rising tide. Ted managed to escape through an open window, emerging disoriented and gasping for air, but Kopechne remained inside, unable to free herself. In his later testimony, Ted described diving back into the murky depths 7 or 8 times in desperate attempts to rescue her, battling the strong current and his own physical exhaustion. But each effort proved futile. Overwhelmed by shock and trauma, he rested briefly on the pond's bank for about 15 minutes, his mind reeling from the horror, before mustering the strength to walk the approximately 1-mile distance back to the Lawrence cottage. Along the way, he passed 4 houses equipped with telephones. Yet in his dazed state, he did not stop to seek help, a decision that would later become a focal point of criticism and controversy. Arriving at the cottage after 1 a.m., Ted urgently enlisted the aid of Gargan and Markham, explaining the accident in hushed, frantic tones. The 3 men rushed back to the scene in a rented white Valiant, where Gargan and Markham stripped down and attempted multiple dives into the pond to reach Kopechne, but the powerful tidal currents thwarted their efforts once again. Defeated, they drove to the ferry landing, where Ted implored his companions not to alert authorities immediately, assuring them he would handle the report himself. Instead, in a moment of desperation, Ted dove into the 500-foot wide channel separating Chappaquiddick from Edgartown and swam across the cold, choppy waters, arriving exhausted at his room in the Shiretown Inn around 2:30 a.m. There, he changed out of his wet clothes and collapsed into bed, his mind tormented by the night's events. Gargan and Markham returned to the cottage without waking the other guests, preserving an uneasy silence through the remaining hours of darkness. By morning, Ted appeared remarkably composed on the surface, engaging in casual conversation with a sailing regatta winner at 7:30 a.m., as if nothing had occurred. At 8 a.m., Gargan and Markham met him in Edgartown, expecting he had already reported the accident, only to learn he had not. Around 8:20 a.m., two fishermen spotted the submerged car protruding from the pond and promptly notified the police. Scuba diver John Farrar arrived on the scene and recovered Kopechny's body at 8:45 a.m., noting in his report that she might have survived for a time in an air pocket. Within the overturned vehicle had rescue come sooner. Her cause of death was drowning, with no evidence of fatal impact injuries. It was only at 9:50 a.m. that Ted finally entered the Edgartown police station, identifying himself as the driver and dictating a statement that attributed his nearly 10-hour delay in reporting to shock and a possible concussion sustained in the crash. This inexplicable lag ignited a firestorm of public outrage, speculation, and accusations of cover-up, with questions swirling about alcohol consumption, though no autopsy was performed on Kopechny, leaving blood alcohol levels undetermined, and potential impropriety, including unfounded rumors of an affair between Ted and Kopechny, which both parties' associates vehemently denied. The public backlash was immediate and immense, with newspaper headlines across the country dissecting Ted's actions, character, and judgment in unforgiving detail. The incident effectively derailed any near-term presidential ambitions Ted might have harbored, casting a long, haunting shadow over his career and personal life for decades to come. Legal proceedings unfolded swiftly. On July 25, 1969, Ted appeared in court and pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident, receiving a 2-month suspended sentence that critics decried as lenient, attributing it to his privileged status as a Kennedy. That same evening, from the family compound in Hyannisport, Ted delivered a nationally televised address admitting to moral failings in not reporting the accident promptly, but firmly denying any wrongdoing or impairment, and asking the people of Massachusetts whether he should resign his Senate seat. The overwhelming wave of supportive responses convinced him to remain in office. A judicial inquest in January 1970, presided over by Judge James A. Boyle, found probable cause for negligent driving, but stopped short of recommending manslaughter charges. A grand jury convened in April 1970, but issued no indictments, closing the legal chapter without further prosecution. For Joan, the incident arrived at a moment of acute personal fragility. At 32 years old and pregnant with what would have been their 4th child, she was already confined to strict bed rest at their Squaw Island home off Hyannisport, following 2 previous miscarriages that had left her physically and emotionally drained. Doctors had warned her against any exertion to protect the pregnancy, yet in a display of unwavering loyalty and a sense of public duty, Joan defied medical advice and insisted on attending Mary Jo Kopechny's funeral on July 22nd in Plymouth, Pennsylvania. Her presence there, somber and composed, was a gesture of respect for the deceased and solidarity with her husband amid the growing storm of controversy. 3 days later, on July 25th, she stood resolutely by Ted's side in the Edgartown courtroom, holding his hand as the judge delivered the suspended sentence, her quiet strength a visible counterpoint to the swirling chaos. The accumulated stress proved overwhelming, culminating in Joan's third miscarriage in August 1969, a baby boy, which medical professionals directly linked to the intense emotional duress of the scandal. Discharged from Cape Cod Hospital after the loss, Joan faced not only the grief of another child's death, but also the relentless public humiliation, media dissection of her every expression, and the profound physical and mental exhaustion of being thrust into the epicenter of a national tragedy. The roots of Joan's alcoholism can be traced back to the deep-seated strains that gradually eroded the foundation of her marriage, a relationship that had initially blossomed with hope and optimism when she wed Ted Kennedy in 1958. What began as a promising union filled with the excitement of young love and shared ambitions slowly transformed into a source of profound emotional turmoil over the course of more than 2 decades. As Ted's political career ascended to remarkable heights, characterized by his extended service in the United States Senate, significant legislative accomplishments that shaped national policy, and a high-profile but ultimately unsuccessful bid for the presidency in 1980, Joan frequently found herself relegated to the background, shouldering the responsibilities of maintaining the household and raising their children amid the relentless whirlwind of the Kennedy family's public life. This existence was marked by an unending series of highs and lows, triumphant political victories, juxtaposed against devastating personal and familial tragedies that tested the limits of human resilience. The assassinations of her brothers-in-law, President John F. Kennedy in 1963, a shocking event that plunged the nation into mourning, and Senator Robert F. Kennedy in 1968, another brutal blow during a time of social upheaval, inflicted lasting psychological wounds on Joan, amplifying her own private sorrows. These losses were compounded by her personal experiences of repeated miscarriages, including 3 heartbreaking ones before the birth of her first child, which left her grappling with grief and a sense of inadequacy, and yet another miscarriage that occurred in the aftermath of the infamous Chappaquiddick incident in 1969. That scandal, in which a young woman named Mary Jo Kopechne tragically drowned after Ted's car veered off a bridge on Martha's Vineyard, not only tarnished his reputation, but also shattered Joan's fragile emotional state. At the time, she was pregnant and confined to bed rest on doctor's orders, yet she defied medical advice to attend the funeral and subsequent court proceedings, driven by a sense of duty and loyalty. The immense stress from this ordeal was directly blamed for her subsequent miscarriage, a loss that deepened her despair and highlighted the toll of living under constant public scrutiny. These cumulative events intertwined with persistent rumors of Ted's extramarital affairs that circulated in Washington circles and the media, as well as the Kennedy family's ingrained win-at-all-costs mentality that prioritized ambition over personal well-being, cultivated a profound sense of isolation and alienation for Joan. She would later open up in personal reflections, confiding that following the Chappaquiddick-related miscarriage, she plunged into a state of utter hopelessness, envisioning no future for herself amid the ruins of her dreams, which she identified as the pivotal moment when her alcoholism truly took hold, as a desperate mechanism to numb the overwhelming pain and escape the harsh realities of her life. By the late 1970s, as the fabric of their marriage continued to unravel under the weight of these accumulated burdens, her reliance on alcohol escalated dramatically, shifting from sporadic attempts at self-medication to a full-blown chronic dependency that permeated every aspect of her daily routine, disrupting her ability to function normally and straining the delicate bonds within her family. Joan's ongoing battle with alcoholism was defined by a tumultuous pattern of intermittent sobriety punctuated by crushing relapses, a cycle that vividly illustrated the deceptive and relentless grip of addiction on an individual's life. Despite the challenges, she demonstrated sincere determination in her fight against it, actively pursuing recovery through a variety of structured interventions, including enrollment in specialized treatment programs, intensive one-on-one therapy sessions with mental health professionals, and participation in supportive communities such as Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, where the anonymity and camaraderie offered her moments of genuine comfort through the sharing of personal narratives and the establishment of accountability partnerships. In periods of clarity and strength, she voiced a sense of hopefulness in public interviews, emphasizing how the unwavering encouragement from close friends and devoted family members served as a crucial lifeline, helping her navigate the darkest times and inspiring her to persevere. However, the relapses proved to be particularly devastating, often ignited by triggers such as overwhelming feelings of loneliness that stemmed from her marital discord, the lingering shadows of unresolved trauma from past losses and scandals, or the persistent pressure of public expectations associated with bearing the prestigious Kennedy name, which demanded a facade of perfection even in private anguish. In her efforts to hide her escalating drinking from those around her, Joan turned to increasingly secretive and desperate strategies that revealed the depths of her inner desperation and the overwhelming shame that accompanied her condition. According to various reports and intimate family recollections, she ingeniously or tragically resorted to consuming everyday household items like vanilla extract, a staple in baking known for its surprisingly high alcohol content, and even mouthwash, which could be found in any bathroom cabinet and provided a quick odor-disguising source of intoxication without the obvious scent of traditional liquor lingering on her breath. These methods were far from trivial stories. They served as heart-wrenching symbols of her profound internal conflict, transforming ordinary elements of domestic life into covert arenas of struggle in her daily war against the insidious disease of alcoholism, where even the most mundane routines became fraught with hidden battles for control. The public exposures of Joan's addiction were especially agonizing, converting what were deeply personal hardships into widely broadcast spectacles that intensified her feelings of humiliation and prompted urgent pleas from loved ones for more aggressive intervention. Her multiple arrests for driving under the influence, DUI, emerged as grim markers in her journey, each incident stripping away another layer of the polished public persona she had long cultivated as a graceful and composed figure in American society. The earliest recorded episode unfolded in 1974 in Virginia, where authorities charged her with DUI after observing impaired driving, leading to a 6-month suspension of her driver's license and a requirement to complete alcohol education courses, a penalty that, while comparatively lenient, acted as an early warning sign of the underlying turmoil brewing beneath the surface. This troubling pattern persisted and resurfaced in the late 1980s on Cape Cod, where she was involved in a crash into a fence that resulted in additional DUI charges, a 45-day revocation of her driving privileges, and a judicial order for her to undergo professional treatment to address her issues. However, the year 1991 marked an exceptionally chaotic and pivotal chapter, featuring no fewer than 3 separate DUI arrests that catapulted her into the harsh glare of relentless media coverage, turning her private vulnerabilities into fodder for national headlines. One particularly stark example involved her being stopped by police on Boston's Southeast Expressway due to reports of erratic and dangerous driving behaviors. Upon investigation, officers found her in the act of drinking vodka straight from a bottle concealed within the vehicle, a raw and unflinching snapshot that symbolized the complete unraveling of her self-restraint and the throes of her addiction's dominance. With each of these arrests came a cascade of legal ramifications designed to enforce change. Monetary fines that added financial strain, periods of probation that monitored her compliance, suspended jail sentences that loomed as threats, and recurrent court-mandated rehabilitation efforts at esteemed institutions like McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts, a facility celebrated for its cutting-edge psychiatric care and specialized addiction recovery programs, and St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York City, which offered tailored therapies for high-profile patients. Judges in these cases crafted detailed recovery blueprints, incorporating elements such as extended inpatient treatment stays for intensive care and ongoing outpatient counseling sessions focused on relapse prevention, all with the intent of dismantling the addictive patterns that ensnared her, though the cycle of recovery and setbacks stubbornly endured, highlighting the formidable obstacles to achieving enduring sobriety. Even following the formal end of her marriage through divorce, Joan's struggles with addiction showed no signs of abatement, as evidenced by a subsequent arrest in 2000 on Cape Cod, which underscored the tenacious and long-lasting clutches of her dependency. The episode began when an observant and worried member of the public placed a 911 call to report a blue Buick weaving perilously through the roads of Marston's Mills, alerting law enforcement to intervene promptly. Upon pulling her over, officers administered field sobriety tests, which she failed, followed by a breathalyzer examination at the police station that confirmed her blood alcohol level exceeded the legal threshold, culminating in her entering guilty pleas to the charges. The court responded with a sentence of 2 years probation, coupled with yet another directive for mandated treatment to tackle the root causes of her behavior. These repeated brushes with the law transcended mere punitive measures. They represented involuntary public confessions of her fragility, each one chipping away at her self-esteem and subjecting her to the critical gaze of a public that had previously revered her as a symbol of poise and refinement. In her own words, shared during reflective interviews over the years, Joan conveyed the acute sense of these arrests as her absolute rock bottoms, moments where she felt utterly laid bare, vulnerable, and overwhelmed by defeat, though they occasionally ignited temporary surges of motivation for transformation, such as redoubling her attendance at AA gatherings for communal support or engaging in discreet private therapy to probe and mend the deep emotional scars that perpetuated her cycle of addiction. Beyond the arrests, Joan's addiction manifested in alarming public episodes that highlighted the physical dangers and prompted family action. In July 2004, she was found unconscious on a rain-soaked street in Boston's upscale Back Bay neighborhood, mere blocks from her condominium in the historic Beacon Hill area, a residence that served as her urban retreat when away from the Cape Cod family properties. The night was stormy, with heavy downpours adding to the scene's desolation, and Joan had fallen hard, sustaining a concussion and a broken shoulder that required immediate hospitalization at Massachusetts General Hospital. The individual who discovered her, a compassionate stranger navigating the wet streets, initially did not recognize her as the former Mrs. Ted Kennedy. To him, she was simply a person in distress, vulnerable to the elements and her own condition. This anonymity in crisis was a stark contrast to her public persona, but the incident quickly made headlines, reigniting discussions about her ongoing struggles. Less than a year later, in 2005, a similar event unfolded when she was discovered sprawled on the sidewalk along Beacon Street, having slipped while intoxicated and striking her head once more. Paramedics transported her to the hospital for treatment of the head injury, and the recurrence of such falls served as a catalyst for her family's intervention. These were not mere accidents, but symptoms of a deeper crisis, where alcohol impaired her judgment and physical coordination, leading to life-threatening situations that could no longer be ignored. The 2005 guardianship proceedings stemmed directly from these incidents, representing a turning point where her children, Kara, Ted Jr., and Patrick, stepped in with tough love to safeguard her well-being. Petitioning the court for legal control over her personal and financial affairs, they cited her inability to manage independently amid the addiction's toll. Joan initially resisted, viewing it as an infringement on her autonomy, but the family reached a settlement that balanced protection with respect. 2 trustees would oversee her estate and finances, a guardian would monitor her daily needs and medical compliance, and she agreed to enter rehabilitation once again, committing to a regimen that included therapy, medication for co-occurring issues like depression, and regular check-ins. This arrangement was born from years of concern as her children had witnessed the relapses firsthand, Patrick in particular, drawing parallels to his own battles with addiction and bipolar disorder. The guardianship also tied into contentious decisions, like the sale of the Squaw Island house, where Joan pushed for the transaction to secure funds for her care, while her children objected, fearing it would destabilize her further. Ultimately, the property sold in December 2005 for an undisclosed amount, though assessed at around $3.7 million, marking the end of a cherished family asset and a symbol of her independence. Joan's addiction did not exist in isolation. It was deeply entangled with a generational legacy of alcoholism that amplified its destructiveness. Both her parents, Virginia, Joan Stead Bennett, and Harry Wiggin Bennett Jr., were alcoholics whose untreated issues created a household environment where heavy drinking was normalized behind a facade of success. Harry, a Cornell-educated advertising executive with a demanding career, and Virginia, a homemaker focused on family, modeled coping mechanisms that Joan internalized during her Bronxville childhood. This genetic and environmental predisposition met the Kennedy family's own history of substance abuse, where Ted himself struggled with alcoholism, often using it to self-medicate the traumas of his life, the assassinations of his brothers, the Chappaquiddick scandal's lingering guilt, and the 1964 plane crash that left him with a broken back and chronic pain, potentially exacerbating untreated post-traumatic stress disorder. Son Patrick Kennedy, in his 2015 memoir, A Common Struggle, provided vivid insights into this familial pattern, describing how Ted's drinking escalated after personal and political losses conducted in high-profile settings like Palm Beach bars or Washington haunts, yet remained functional until later years when he achieved sobriety in the 1990s, following a personal epiphany. Patrick portrayed the home dynamic as a perfect storm, with Joan retreating into isolation after the separation, basing herself in Boston, while a nanny helped raise the children, allowing her binges to go unchecked. He linked his own addictions, cocaine use as a teenager, multiple rehab stints, and a 2006 car crash near the Capitol while under the influence, to this inherited cycle, advocating for mental health parity laws as a way to break it. Even siblings Kara and Ted Jr. were touched by the shadow. Ted Jr. underwent alcohol treatment in 1991, and Kara's life was cut short in 2011 by a heart attack possibly weakened by her earlier lung cancer battle. A Kennedy family friend summed it up: her parents were both alcoholics, and it's just a disease that gets worse and worse unless you try and get some control over it. This intergenerational curse turned Joan's personal fight into a shared affliction, where silence and denial only deepened the wounds. In candid interviews, such as her feature in McCall's magazine, Joan laid bare the emotional core of her addiction, describing the profound loneliness that drove her to drink and the exhaustive efforts to reclaim her life. For a few months, everyone had to put on this show, and then I just didn't care anymore. She recounted of the post-Chappaquiddick period, marking it as the tipping point where alcohol became her primary escape. She spoke of the shame that accompanied each relapse, the failed attempts at sobriety that left her feeling defeated, and the flickering hope during periods of clarity when support from loved ones made recovery seem possible. "I don't want to be known as the alcoholic," she emphasized, yearning to be seen for her full identity as a devoted mother, accomplished pianist, and advocate for arts education, rather than reduced to her struggles. These admissions were brave steps toward destigmatization, as Patrick noted, making Joan one of the first high-profile figures to publicly discuss seeking treatment for both alcoholism and psychiatric issues, paving the way for others to seek help without fear. As Joan's addiction progressively worsened over the years, it became deeply and inextricably intertwined with the steady deterioration of her marriage to Ted Kennedy, ultimately leading to a painful divorce that represented the complete shattering of what had once been portrayed as an idealized partnership filled with promise and glamour. After more than 2 decades together, having tied the knot in a high-profile ceremony in 1958, amid the Kennedy family's rising political dynasty, Joan and Ted made the difficult decision to separate in 1978, a move that stemmed from a multitude of accumulated strains that had gradually worn away at the core of their relationship. These included the growing emotional distance fostered by Ted's all-consuming career in the United States Senate, where his long hours, frequent travels, and intense focus on legislative battles left little room for personal connection, the persistent and hurtful rumors of his extramarital affairs that swirled through Washington social circles and occasionally spilled into the press, eroding trust and fostering resentment. The Kennedy family's string of profound tragedies, from assassinations to personal losses, which amplified the couple's shared grief but also highlighted their differing ways of coping, and Joan's escalating dependence on alcohol as a maladaptive mechanism to dull the pain of isolation, unmet expectations, and the relentless pressure of living in the public eye. Despite this separation, the couple chose to postpone any formal divorce proceedings in order to preserve a facade of stability and unity during Ted's ambitious 1980 presidential campaign, where he challenged the incumbent President Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination, a grueling contest marred by lingering questions about the Chappaquiddick scandal of 1969, scrutiny over Ted's personal behavior and lifestyle, and broader shifts in the American political landscape toward conservatism, culminating in his defeat at the Democratic National Convention in New York that summer. Throughout this high-stakes period, Joan demonstrated remarkable loyalty by standing resolutely by his side in public appearances, attending rallies, fundraisers, and convention events. With a composed demeanor that masked her inner turmoil, all while privately acknowledging that the emotional chasm between them had become too vast to bridge, rendering reconciliation impossible. It was not until 1981 that they publicly announced their intention to pursue a divorce, a revelation that sent ripples through political and social circles, with the legal process dragging on amid negotiations and court deliberations, until it was finally formalized in 1983 at the Barnstable Probate Court in Massachusetts on the grounds of an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, a neutral legal term that encapsulated years of mutual unhappiness, divergent life paths, and the irreversible damage inflicted by personal struggles and external pressures. The divorce settlement was meticulously structured and comprehensive, drawing upon the considerable wealth amassed by the Kennedy family through generations of business acumen, investments, and political influence, while aiming to secure Joan's financial independence and provide for their children's future needs in the aftermath of the split. Contemporary reports from reliable sources estimated that Joan received a substantial lump sum cash payment ranging between $4 million and $5 million, a figure that, in the economic context of the early 1980s, represented a significant fortune capable of funding a comfortable lifestyle free from immediate financial worries. This was further bolstered by provisions for ongoing alimony payments to support her day-to-day living expenses and dedicated child support for their youngest son, Patrick, who was just 15 years old at the time, and still required substantial parental resources for his education, upbringing, and well-being amid the family's transition. In addition to these monetary arrangements, Joan was awarded half of the couple's joint personal property, encompassing a wide array of valuables such as artwork, jewelry, furniture, and investment holdings that had been accumulated over the course of their 24-year marriage, enabling her to establish a new foundation for her life with a sense of equity and closure. One of the most poignant and symbolically significant aspects of the settlement was Joan's retention of full ownership of the cherished Squaw Island House, a sprawling 13-room waterfront property situated on 1.18 acres of prime land overlooking the serene expanse of Nantucket Sound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, a home that held deep personal roots for her, having been part of her Bennett family heritage since 1901, well before the Kennedy clan's establishment in the nearby area nearly 3 decades later. This historic retreat, originally consisting of 2 modest shingled cottages acquired by her grandparents and subsequently merged into a single expansive family compound, boasted weathered gray exteriors that blended seamlessly with the coastal landscape, large windows offering breathtaking panoramic views of the ocean waves and distant horizons, lush gardens that provided a tranquil escape, and an overall aura of timeless seclusion that had served as Joan's idyllic childhood summer sanctuary, filled with memories of carefree days by the sea, far removed from the intensity of political life. In contrast to the more ostentatious Kennedy compound just a short distance away, this property became a powerful emblem of her reclaimed autonomy and a refuge where she could distance herself from the shadows of her former in-laws' world. Upon the settlement's announcement, Joan herself described it publicly as very generous, underscoring the couple's shared resolve to prioritize amicable co-parenting and foster ongoing mutual respect for the benefit of their 3 children, Kara, Ted Jr., and Patrick, who remained at the heart of their post-divorce arrangements, with joint custody agreements designed to ensure stability and continued family bonds, to shield the proceedings from excessive media intrusion and maintain a degree of privacy in an otherwise very public life. The initial filings were strategically handled in Virginia, a jurisdiction known for its discretion in high-profile cases, although inevitable leaks and press coverage still brought certain details to light, including the intricacies of custody schedules and Joan's unwavering commitment to preserving warm relationships with the extended Kennedy family, even as she embarked on her own path toward healing and self-reliance. Following her divorce from Ted Kennedy, Joan redirected her energies toward personal development and healing, embarking on a journey of self-discovery that included pursuing higher education and leveraging her artistic talents for meaningful endeavors. In 1982, just prior to the official finalization of the divorce proceedings, she achieved a significant academic milestone by earning a master's degree in education from Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, an accomplishment that symbolized her resilience and determination to redefine her identity beyond the role of a political spouse, equipping her with new skills and a sense of empowerment amid the transitions of her life. Building on her lifelong passion for music, which had always served as a source of solace during the turbulent times, Joan channeled this interest into charitable performances as an accomplished pianist, gracing events with her renditions of classical pieces that raised funds for various causes and brought joy to audiences, while also authoring a heartfelt book titled The Joy of Classical Music, A Guide for You and Your Family. In 1992, an accessible and engaging volume specifically designed to introduce children and families to the wonders of the classical repertoire, complete with historical anecdotes, listening recommendations, and interactive suggestions to foster appreciation for the arts in everyday life. Extending her influence into advocacy work, she became a vocal proponent for issues such as fetal alcohol syndrome awareness, drawing directly from the well of her own painful experiences with addiction and loss to educate the public, support affected families, and push for preventive measures, thereby transforming her personal hardships into a platform for helping others navigate similar challenges with empathy and informed guidance. Meanwhile, Ted Kennedy found a renewed sense of stability and purpose in his personal life through his 1992 marriage to Victoria Reggie, a sharp-minded Washington lawyer whose steady presence and supportive nature provided him with a grounding influence that helped him confront and overcome his own battles with alcohol, leading to a period of sustained sobriety and a more balanced approach to his demanding political career. In contrast, Joan chose to remain single after the divorce, deliberately prioritizing her ongoing commitment to sobriety and the nurturing of her close family relationships, even as the tenacious hold of her addiction presented persistent obstacles that required continual vigilance, therapy, and support systems to manage effectively. By 2009, in the wake of Ted's passing from brain cancer at the age of 77, a loss that reverberated through the nation and the Kennedy legacy, Joan made a touching appearance at his funeral services held at the iconic Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, an act that served as a poignant symbol of closure and reconciliation after their decades-long shared history marked by love, strife, and mutual growth. As conveyed by her representatives at the time, she feels it's very nice to be included in the final saying goodbye to him, a sentiment that underscored the depth of their 25-year marriage, the 3 children they raised together, and the enduring familial bonds that transcended the pain of separation and personal struggles, allowing for a dignified farewell amid a gathering of political dignitaries, family members, and friends. As the years unfolded, the dynamics within the Kennedy family continued to evolve in complex ways, influenced by the lingering shadows of addiction and divorce, with underlying tensions occasionally bubbling to the surface in public and private spheres. This was particularly evident in the release of Patrick Kennedy's 2015 memoir, a candid and introspective work in which he explored the profound intergenerational ripple effects of addiction and mental health challenges within the family, detailing how these issues had shaped his own life without seeking direct input or collaboration from Joan, a choice that prompted her to publicly distance herself from the book and criticize its portrayal as inaccurate or overly one-sided in its recollections. Ted Jr., Joan's eldest son, voiced his own deep heartbreak regarding the memoir's content, expressing concern that it unnecessarily reopened old emotional wounds and revisited painful chapters of their family history that he believed were better left in the past for the sake of healing and unity. Nevertheless, Patrick staunchly defended the book as an authentic expression of his personal narrative, intended not to assign blame, but to break the cycle of stigma surrounding mental health and addiction by bringing these topics into the open dialogue, asserting that the family's long-held tradition of silence and stoicism had only served to exacerbate the suffering and isolation experienced by multiple generations. In one particularly revealing passage, he described being raised by a nanny while his mother based herself in Boston after the separation, a vivid illustration of how the divorce had fundamentally reshaped the contours of their childhoods, introducing elements of geographical and emotional distance that contributed to feelings of instability and, in Patrick's case, his own subsequent struggles with substance abuse and bipolar disorder. Despite these public rifts and moments of discord, which highlighted the challenges of reconciling differing perspectives on shared traumas, the Kennedy family ultimately preserved a resilient foundation of love, forgiveness, and mutual support, with Joan frequently expressing profound gratitude for her children's unwavering encouragement during her various phases of recovery, crediting them for pivotal interventions, such as the establishment of a legal guardianship arrangement that provided structured oversight and assistance in managing her health and well-being during particularly vulnerable periods. Thank you for watching our video on the remarkable life of Virginia Joan Bennett Kennedy. Her story, a poignant blend of grace, tragedy, and resilience, continues to captivate and inspire. From her elegance in the spotlight to her personal struggles behind the scenes, Joan's journey reflects the strength of a woman navigating a storm of fame and hardship. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring biographies. Share your thoughts below. What aspect of Joan's life resonated with you the most? Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos exploring the lives of extraordinary figures. For more content like this, check out our channel and join our community of history enthusiasts. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.